Hello, and I was going to say a good afternoon. My name is Dr. Chan, and for this week, I am hosting on behalf of Dr. Jacqueline the Corner Bookstore. So, a warm welcome, USA Global TV and radio viewers, and to our YouTube viewers, and LinkedIn and Facebook as well. So, today is quite extreme hot temperatures here in the UK. So the studio's nice and ventilated, so it's really good. Lots of air's coming through. So then we can share what an exciting episode this is going to be. And it really is, viewers. But before I bring on our special guest today, I would like to mention that we currently at USA Global TV and Radio, our YouTube channel, is currently at 40,000 subscribers. We have, where our aim is to go for 100,000, 100K. So please do subscribe and support USA Global TV and Radio. We are a channel that promotes brand awareness, most important, hope, education, and sharing your story and sharing your brand and sharing your education to contribute towards the collective consciousness, the mothership of USA Global TV and Radio. In saying that, we also have currently at 11K Dr. Jacqueline Kerbeck's private YouTube channel. And we are looking at reaching 100K for that. So 100K by the 17th of September this year. So we're going strong. We really are. We're evolving. But we do need your help and support. So please do reach out. Go onto the channel and subscribe on our YouTube channel on both. Fantastic. Right. Before now, I'm going to tell you about our special guest. He is a phenomenal novelist. I would even call him a superhero of our times, without a doubt. He wrote a fabulous book called Thunderdog. He is a miraculous survivor of 9/11. At 14 years old, he had his first guide dog. How wonderful, how sweet is that? So the infinity between him and the four-legged furry beings, and I call them that anyway, but four-legged dogs is really, really special and precious. So I'm going to bring him on now. His name is Michael Hingson. So put your hands together. Here we go. And let's bring in Michael Hingson. Good afternoon, Michael.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having us.
You're very welcome. Michael, for our viewers, can you please explain who you are and just a short 2 or 3 lines of an introduction to our viewers?
I've been blind my whole life. I was born 2 months premature, and due to being given a pure oxygen environment in an incubator, my retinas didn't grow properly, so I basically was blind from birth. The doctors told my parents to send me off to a home because no blind child could ever grow up to amount to anything, and my parents said, "You're wrong. We're going to raise him and give him the opportunity to do whatever he wants," and they did. And so for me, I grew up believing that I was as capable as anyone else. I might not do things exactly the same way that others did, but I could still do them. I went off and got a master's degree in physics. I've worked in high-tech industry and so on, and have been a professional in sales for many, many years. And then, of course, on September 11th, as you mentioned, we were in the World Trade Center. I had opened an office on the 78th floor of Tower 1, and I escaped along with my guide dog at the time, Roselle, and a colleague, David Frank, from the 78th floor because I knew what to do. I was the leader of that office, And I needed to be able to do what any leader would do. The difference is I don't read signs, so I needed to know information. And the reality is that's one of the lessons that we're actually going to talk about in the new book that's being published in August called Live Like a Guide Dog. Um, but the idea is that knowledge is a lot better than just relying, for example, on signs, especially if a room becomes full of smoke or whatever, and then suddenly you can't read signs anymore. So knowledge is a very helpful thing. Anyway, after September 11th, people started calling me and asking me if I would travel and speak to their organizations and talk about the lessons we should learn from September 11th. And so I began doing that. And as my wife and I discussed, and decided selling life and philosophy is a whole lot more fun and satisfying and rewarding than selling computer hardware and managing a computer hardware sales team. So by the beginning of 2002, I became a full-time public speaker and have been doing it ever since. And I travel and speak wherever people want me to come and tell the story. And we talk about leadership and trust and teamwork and a variety of other subjects and topics as well. So um, have a lot of fun speaking and I enjoy it. And hopefully some of your listeners will need a speaker. We can talk about that if you'd like later.
Thank you so much, Michael. That's a lot. That's a lot to take on board. That's a lot that you've accomplished so far, and 41 years in sales. That's incredible, and being a public speaker as well. But what I would like to talk to you about is a little bit about the 9/11. But just to say that I would like, when you were leading the party or the survivors down 78 flights with Roselle,
Hmm.
your guide dog at the time.
Yes.
Um, how 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 was it? I mean, it was petrifying at the same time. You could, because do you have more of a heightened awareness of feeling than other human beings?
Not
Be-
simply because I'm blind. A lot of people say, "Oh, you're blind, you have heightened senses." Not necessarily.
Yeah.
I know some people who don't listen very well at all. It's all a matter of practice and developing skills for any of us who happen to be blind or have other kinds of differences and gifts in our lives. SEAL Team Six, the military team, have very much heightened senses because they trained themselves to develop those senses. Some blind people do that as well, and other people do that as well. A lot of people don't do that. So for me, the reality is I had spent a lot of time prior to September 11th learning what to do in the case of an emergency. I consulted with the Port Authority police people, fire and emergency preparedness people, and others. And so I knew how to travel around the World Trade Center. I knew what the emergency evacuation procedures were and what needed to be done. And on September 11th, not having anticipated that there would be an emergency, but at the same time preparing for it, a mindset kicked in when suddenly we had to deal with facing evacuation. And that mindset essentially said, you know what to do, don't fear it. Now, that isn't to say I wasn't afraid. I guarantee you, I have a very vivid imagination and imagine things that, in some senses, were as bad or worse than what really occurred until we found out what happened. But the issue is that I prepared, and so I knew what to do. So I used fear in a positive way. As I tell people now, you can learn not to be blinded or overwhelmed by fear. When an emergency thing happens and you're faced with a challenge, the fact of the matter is you can learn how to use fear as a very powerful motivator and tool to help you function and focus rather than letting fear overwhelm you and terrifying you so that now you're paralyzed in, if you will, and can't make a decision. That's what Live Like a Guide Dog is going to be all about when it comes out. And
Right.
it's actually available for pre-order now. But the point is that you can learn to control fear and use it as a powerful tool in your life.
Thank you, Michael. That is amazing, that wisdom. You can learn to use fear as a powerful tool rather than be in fear of fear itself. That is amazing. I love it. I was going to say, Michael, with after 9/11, and you went on the American talk shows and everything, did your life just change? Like, when they say it just changed overnight.
It really did, in so many ways. I should explain that my wife Karen, who passed away in November of 2022, was in a wheelchair her whole life. So we were a multi-disability couple, if you will. And as I said, we decided together if me speaking could help people move on from September 11th, learn more about blindness and guide dogs and so on, then it was worth doing. But it was a conscious choice to accept interviews, to be able to move forward in that way. And very frankly, we got a lot of media interviews. And for me personally, ironically, as much as we all like to pick on the media, talking about September 11th to those people in so many ways, with people who ask some intelligent questions and a lot of not very intelligent questions, helped me personally to be able to move beyond September 11th. And that's true of any kind of an emergency. We really do need to learn to talk about it and internalize it as we move forward from it rather than bottling it up inside. And so for me, talking to the media a lot helped. We got an education on doing all sorts of production. We had one Italian TV company that came to our house. They had 14 people, a few of which just stood around and sat around and didn't do much. And then we had other companies and from other countries where there were like 1 and 2 people and they did everything. It was just kind of amazing and fascinating to watch. But the bottom line is it did change my life, but we made that choice to allow it. And it wasn't an ego issue. For me, it was an issue of if I can help people move forward and progress from this kind of thing, then it's a good thing to do.
Well, like I said, Michael, you are absolutely a superhero in every way, and you saved so many lives. So, yeah, do you feel that it was your mission? When you felt you had that not a voice or something like an inner intuition that said, "Okay, keep calm. This is what you got to do."
Well, yeah. And in fact, one of the stories in Thunderdog, I believe in chapter 10,
Yeah.
um, it talks about the fact that when Tower 2 began to collapse and we were very close to it, everyone turned and ran. And literally, my colleague David Frank turned and ran, and then I turned Roselle 180 degrees and we started running back the way we came. The first thing that happened to me after we turned and ran was I said, God, I can't believe that you got us out of a building just to have it fall on us. And I think that was probably the closest I came to really letting fear take over. But as soon as I said that, I heard a voice in my head as clearly as all of you hear me now. Then the voice said, don't worry about what you can't control. Focus on running with Roselle and the rest will take care of itself. And then I had this sense of calm and peace that if we worked together, we would be fine. And that's exactly what happened. Was that God talking to me? Yes, it was. I'm
Yeah.
not, and it's as simple as that. I'm not saying that it was anything other than God with all the different religions of the world. But the bottom line is that I did feel that if we worked together, we would be okay. Well, to continue the story for a moment, we got to Fulton Street, which was the next street that we ran back to, turned right, caught up to David. David and I continued to run. We were involved and enveloped in all the dust clouds and all the dirt and debris from Tower 2 collapsing. We knew we had to get out of it. There was a building to my right. I started telling Roselle, right, right, giving her hand signals. And I don't know whether she could hear me or see my hand signals. But suddenly I heard an opening on the right, and Roselle must have known what I wanted because she turned right, she took one step, and she stopped, and she planted her feet and would not move. And I kept saying, come on, Roselle. And then I realized, wait a minute, focus on running with Roselle, and the rest will take care of itself. She stopped for a reason. And the reason she stopped was something that we know in guide dog world as intelligent disobedience. That is to say, the dog's job isn't to lead me. The dog's job isn't to know where I want to go and how to get there. The dog's job is to make sure that we walk safely. Well, I realized when Roselle stopped, there had to be a reason. And so I investigated and discovered that we were at the top of a flight of stairs. When I told her forward, she walked down the stairs because she was waiting for the right command. And so focus on running with Roselle, and the rest will take care of itself. And that's one of the important lessons that I've talked about a lot since September 11th and continue to talk about. Don't worry about what you can't control. If you focus on everything around you, and most of which you don't have any influence over, all you're going to do is drive yourself insane. Focus on the things that you can and focus on that, and you'll be a lot better off.
Oh, it's phenomenal. Your wisdom, it's just it's coming from another world. It's amazing. And with that, Michael, do you hold master classes, or do you go to companies to help them with prevention?
I haven't as such held classes, but yes, I speak. Next week, I travel, for example, to Louisiana to speak at the Louisiana Credit Union League in New Orleans. So I do travel a lot. When the pandemic began, travel died down a lot, of course. And then when my wife started becoming ill in 2022, I couldn't really travel and leave her at home. But now that she has passed, and we were married 40 years, so lots of memories over 40 years. And as I love to tell people, she's monitoring me from somewhere. And if I misbehave, I'm going to hear about it. So I got to be a good kid. But the bottom line is that I'm really working to ramp speaking up again. Later near the end of October, I will actually be in London speaking at an event for business continuity international world hybrid. It's an event that takes place, and the business continuity people are really the people that deal with emergencies, or as they describe it, what if. They're the people that anticipate what happens if something happens. They're the people that are, as they also say, generally not paid attention to. They're ignored until there's an emergency, and then everybody needs them. So I'm going to be going over and speaking on the 30th of October to talk about resilience, and that'll be fun.
That's going to be fantastic. Yeah. Oh, my goodness. And I just want to go on about your relationship, your friendship with your guide dogs. What, how, what is the bond? I know the bond is, of course, it is helping to guide you and save you. True.
Well, to guide and save both of us.
Yeah.
Remember what I said. The purpose of a guide dog is to make sure I walk safely. But the other side of it is that the dog trusts me also to know where I want to go and how to get there. And make no mistake, that is my job, not the dog's job. And a lot of people say, well, you're blind, you can't see any of that. Balderdash. There are a lot of ways to learn to do things. One of the biggest things that I've realized over the last year is that sighted people are people with as much a disability as blind people. Your disability is your light dependent, but Thomas Edison invented the electric light bulb back in 1878 so that you had light on demand. And over the last 146 years, we've spent a lot of time as a race finding better and faster and easier ways for you to be able to turn a light on whenever it suddenly became dark. So light on demand is readily available, but make no mistake, your disability is still there. It's just mostly covered up. And I could tell you stories about why I feel that way. But the reality is everyone has a disability. Disability really isn't what people think. It's not a lack of ability. A lot of diversity people tell me, well, of course it's a lack of ability. It begins with dis. And my response is, so does disciple begin with dis. So does discrete begin with dis. So does, discern. So many things. The reality is that it doesn't mean a lack of ability. Disability is a characteristic we all have, and it manifests itself differently for different people. For you who are light dependent, it manifests itself when you suddenly don't have immediate access to a smartphone or a flashlight and the power goes out. And I saw that happen somewhere last year. The fact is, for me, I use a guide dog to travel. The dog's job is to make sure that I walk safely. But the relationship is we are a team, as close-knit a team as you can imagine. We each have a job to do. And, people say dogs love unconditionally. I believe that, but they don't trust unconditionally. You have to earn their trust, and they have to earn your trust as a teammate. And when that relationship forms, and the user especially, who is the team leader, as the guide dog user, I'm the team leader of the team. I have to be responsible for the dog, understand what the dog's needs are, and deal with things when crises come up regarding the dog. or just continue to reward and associate with and love the dog because they love that. And the reality is the team, when it works really well. And that's what we learn when we get a guide dog, is how to build that team.
It's a perfect partnership.
Absolutely.
In every way. I was going to say, Heather Grant, who's producing the show today, she likes to say, I like to say, differently abled.
Yeah, but I don't like that term because I'm not differently abled. It isn't a matter of being differently abled. Differently is not true. I have the same abilities that you do. I may carry out the tasks a little bit differently. I use a piece of software to verbalize whatever comes across the screen, but my ability still is to be able to take that data and interpret it. Um, so I don't, I think differently able. It's like people say, well, you're visually impaired. I am not visually impaired. Visually, I'm not different because I'm blind, and I'm certainly not impaired. Professionals coined that term, and all they've done is a great disservice to blind people. Blind or low vision, just like in the case of the deaf community, it's deaf or hard of hearing, but not hearing impaired. And differently abled, don't make us things that we're not. The fact is, we're able the same way everyone else is, but we do things differently. Does that, to take that a step further, is a left-handed person then differently abled from a right-hand person, or do they use their left hand to do things that most people do with their right hand? We've got to stop putting these categories in place that make us things that we're not. So sorry, Heather, but the reality is differently abled isn't real. It isn't what is accurate. I have the same abilities and the same brain function as anyone else. I may use different technology to do some of the things that I do, but you know what? You use some of that technology as well. And the fact is, differently able is just not accurate.
Well, Michael, I've got to say, I'm both myself and Heather, we're learning a lot. You've opened my eyes to, I never knew this world. It's not really been in my experience, but from what it's almost like a superpower,
Well, it seems that way to you.
Yeah,
It seems
to
that
me
way
it
to
is.
you because it's not what you're used to. For me, it's what I do all the time. The biggest problem for blind people is that most people haven't tried being blind. And you can't just blindfold yourself and go to a restaurant that does dining in the dark and assume in a half hour or an hour you're going to realize what it's like to be blind. All that's going to do is not give you a very good clue, especially when you spill food. It's a matter of learning techniques. Frankly, I don't know how any of you all can get around without a dog or a cane. You guys do pretty well as far as I'm concerned. The reality is we have different skills, we've developed different techniques, but it doesn't make us different. And I think that's the important thing that people need to learn. The unemployment rate among employable blind people, for example, has been extremely high in the 50 to 70% range. It isn't because we can't work, it's because sighted people think we can't work. And that translates to other disabilities as well. The unemployment rate is high because people think we can't do things rather than learning, oh, yeah, you can. You may do it differently. Um, I've heard of people, and I've experienced it some in looking for a job when someone says, well, we provide computer monitors and so on, but we can't provide computer software for you to be able to read the screen because we don't have that budgeted. Bunk. You certainly do. You buy monitors for people. You need to be inclusive and address the issue of dealing with what you need to provide for a blind person to be able to do a job. And you should be as ready and as willing to provide the technologies and the tools that I need as you are for sighted people or people who don't happen to have the disability that I have. I mean, already offices provide fancy coffee machines. They provide lights so that you can see what you're doing walking down the hall. They provide windows so you can look out and other things like that. The fact of the matter is we provide a lot of reasonable accommodations for people, but we exclude people who are different than us, and we've got to get over that.
It's amazing what you're saying. And with that, Michael, aren't you the ambassador of the Braille Society?
The National Federation of the Blind years
Yeah.
ago, in 2009, celebrated the 200th anniversary of the birth of Louis Braille, and there was a Braille literacy program, and I was the ambassador for that program. So I talked a lot about Braille. And again, Braille is just another way of reading, just like reading print is another way of reading. Braille is an alternative, not a substitute for print. There are people who read Braille very well, very rapidly, and very efficiently, and that's because they've learned to do it.
I was going to say, Michael, looking back at like Egyptian hieroglyphics, where it's not words, but it's certain pictures, certain symbols, certain. Is that would that be something that you would be able to?
Not necessarily. Braille is a series of dots, and the dots
Right.
go together in various combinations, just like print is a series of lines that go together in various ways to provide the characters that you read. Again, don't make it more complicated than it needs to be. The fact is, I'm not going to easily and quickly deal with the kinds of characters and technology that you use because those are made to be seen, not felt. Braille is really made to be felt, not seen, although there are people who sight read Braille very well and they work to help transcribe material from print into Braille. It's an alternative to doing the same thing that you do, or print is an alternative to doing the same thing that I do with Braille.
The wisdom. You're such a wise man, Michael Hingson. Honestly, it's absolute pleasure in every way to hear you, to express your thoughts, knowing that what I'm feeling and gathering from this, because it's all about learning every day, in the way that it's almost, even though you're blind, you have more light and more vision than some people that are able to see.
Well, and again, I'm able to, but in a
Yeah.
but I use different technologies to do it. But I'm not different. But I, and I think that we all need to understand that every person on this planet has gifts, and we should never sell the gifts of anyone short just because they're different than we. And so those are some of the messages that I love to travel and talk with people about and consult with companies and organizations that want to learn more about inclusion. And so it is what I do. One of my favorite speeches is a speech entitled Moving from Diversity to Inclusion. And when I start that speech, the first thing I ask people, and I'll ask you, tell me something a blind person can't do. What's the first thing that comes to mind?
Something that a blind person can't do.
What's the first thing that comes to mind when I ask you that question?
No, but then I'm very ignorant, so it's not good.
No, it is. Tell me something that you think a blind person cannot do.
Cannot see through the human eye.
Well, okay, but um, the typical answer when I ask that question is drive a car.
Oh, I don't drive a car, so I'm not really.
There you go. Good for you. Don't drive a car. The way people drive today, I wouldn't want to drive a car either. But the reality is the technology has been developed that allows, and I'm not talking about an autonomous vehicle. I'm talking about a vehicle that actually transmits the information to a blind driver so that they can drive a vehicle just like you do. If anybody would like to see that, visit www.blinddriverchallenge.org and you can see a video of a blind man driving a Ford Escape modified with some other technologies, but driving the Ford Escape around the Daytona Speedway right before the 2011 Rolex 24 auto race. And you will see a person independently driving a vehicle around the speedway, uh, avoiding obstacles and a variety of things like that. The fact of the matter is, blindness isn't the problem. It's a lack of education and a lack of faith that blind people are as capable as others. And so it is what we really need to learn. And it's a lot of fun to have the opportunity to interact with people when they're really curious and really want to make the world better.
Absolutely. And Michael, you are definitely making the world better just by this interview. I would like to go on now about your book, your new book, Live Like a Guide Dog. Can you tell our listeners, our viewers, sorry, what the book is about? Live like a Guide Dog. And it's going to be released August the 20th, and there will be pre-orders, of course, which Dr. Jacqueline will put in the links.
Yeah, because
With,
it is available now for pre-order. So
yes.
when the pandemic began, I realized that I had not talked about this subject. That is to say, I talked a lot about, as I traveled around, being able to get out of the World Trade Center, and that I was able to deal with fear. But I never really worked to teach people how they could learn to control fear themselves. And so we began writing the book, and I worked with a woman, Carrie Wyatt Kent, who is my co-author and colleague on the book. We collaborated. It was absolutely a team effort. And it was a lot of fun to do, just like it was working with Susie Flory when we did Thunderdog. And the whole idea behind the book is that I learned most of what I use to develop team relationships, to function, and so on. I learned really from working with 8 guide dogs and my wife's service dog, Fantasia. And so what I do is use the lessons that I learned from those dogs to try to begin, well, not try, but to begin to teach people this subject that we talked about earlier, which is you can control fear. You've got to work at it, you've got to practice it, but you can learn to control fear. And you can learn to focus on the things that you really need to focus on and not the rest of it. You can learn that fear is something that can be very helpful for you. So we began writing the book, and I mentioned don't worry about what you can't control. But I also have another story. Just after September 11th, I contacted the veterinarians at Guide Dogs for the Blind, where I've gotten all of my dogs, and we talked about September 11th. And I said, "How do you think any of this will affect Roselle?" And they said, "Well, was she threatened in any way?" And I said, "No." Nothing came at her, nothing really hit her or anything like that. So she wasn't threatened. And in fact, when we got home after September 11th, well, later that night, the first thing she did was run away from me, go grab her favorite bone, and started playing tug of war with my retired guide dog, Linny. And as they said, it was over for her. She didn't worry about it. Dogs don't do what if. And we focus way too much on doing what if about every little old thing. And again, the BCI event, what if is important, but there are also ways that you deal with what if. And so I point out to people in Live Like a Guide Dog true stories from a blind man and his dogs about being brave, overcoming adversity, and walking in faith. I talk about the fact that don't try to do what if on every little thing that comes along. Dogs don't, and they tend to be pretty happy in their lives. And we could be a lot happier if we didn't focus on the things that we don't need to worry about. We can what if ourselves to death, and we need to not do that. So we talk about lessons like that in Live Like a Guide Dog. And the idea is to help people start to learn that they can develop the mind muscle to give them the ability to control fear.
I'm just shocked. Just, I have to get this book. This book sounds phenomenal. The fact that what you're saying is there's so much to learn from the animals, from dogs, especially guide dogs, and the fact that it's incredible. It's just, sorry, I'm just so overwhelmed. I really
We
usually I shouldn't be like this because I'm
we
hosting and that.
but we underestimate our dogs. We get a dog. Oh, it's a creature, and we love it and all that. But we don't really learn how to live with them and work with them and make them truly an integral part of our family. People say to me all the time, "Oh, my dog could never do what your dog does." How do you know? And have you ever really worked to develop the teaming relationship? Your dog may very well not be able to do what my current guide dog, Alamo, or any of his predecessors do, because not every dog is cut out to be a guide dog. But every dog can be a good teammate if you do it right. And there's a lot to be learned. So we talk about some of that in Live Like a Guide Dog as well. And as you pointed out, it is available for pre-order. And I know we're going to put the links up. It is available now. It's available on Amazon for pre-order. It's available on Audible for pre-order, and so on. So it is there, and on the 20th of August, any pre-orders will ship. and we're excited for people to get it.
And Live Like a Guide Dog, is it based on Alamo?
It is based on all 8 guide dogs and my wife's dog Fantasia, and we talk about all those dogs. So there are lessons to learn from every dog, and that's what we try to do in Live Like a Guide Dog, is to talk about the lessons that I learned from each dog.
A living testimony from the animal kingdom, from the dog kingdom. That's incredible. Do you feel that, Michael, because we're coming to the end? Oh, actually, we've got a question. Heather Grant, you've made mention of previous guide dogs and retired ones. How long do dogs work as guide dogs, and when do you know they should retire? Great question, Heather.
Good question. And the answer is the average is 6 to 8 years. I expect Alamo to work a lot longer than that. Alamo and I have already been together over 6 years. Sometimes it depends on the health of the dog. Some people are not as good at forming teams as others. Guiding is a very stressful job for a dog because they take it seriously, especially the more you develop the teaming relationship with them. And so it's important to really respond to the dog and keep that stress level down, because that's probably the one thing that most often will contribute to the aging of a dog, and to the dog becoming less capable of guiding. So it's important to really make sure that you work on that stress level and keep the dog's stress level down. I had one dog, Linny, who was the dog before Roselle, who only worked for 3 years, but she had been bit by a tick and it developed into Lyme's disease, which morphed into a kidney disease called glomerulonephritis. Otherwise, she would have been in the World Trade Center. The dog after Roselle, Meryl, only worked for a year and a half, and then she just became too stressed out guiding. As I described to people, Meryl had a type A personality and could not leave work at the office. When we got home and I took the harness off, she still followed me around. She wouldn't play with the other dogs and so on. And that led to stress. My second guide dog, Holland, actually worked for 13 years. So it really varies. How do you know when a guide dog is not able to do it? Well, things happen, like the dog doesn't see as well at night. Maybe the dog becomes more hesitant. The dog wants to continue to work, especially when you have a good teaming relationship. But there comes a time that you realize that the dog isn't doing quite as well as it should. So when Africa, my 7th guide dog in 2017, started slowing down a little bit, and I noticed it, and I had learned how to look for those signs, and she wasn't seeing as well at night, I contacted Guide Dogs for the Blind, and we started the process to get a new guide dog. It took a year, but on February 9th, 2018, Africa retired, and she went to live with her puppy raisers, the people who raised her and taught her basic obedience skills and so on. They lived about 130, 140 miles from where we are. They came up to our house, and it was about 11 or 12 in the afternoon. They came, and I agreed that they could take Africa because we still had Fantasia, and we were going to get another guide, my new guide dog, Alamo. So having 3 dogs was way too much for Karen to handle, especially 2 of them if I were out traveling. So anyway, they took Africa, and she walked out without turning around and looking at me and saying goodbye once. Thanks very much, Africa. Now we know who you are. Excuse me. But the bottom line is that what happened was that 2 days later, then I went up and I got Alamo. But it's a process. There's generally, you can tell when the dogs start to slow down and so on. So it's a process.
It's phenomenal. And this is all in your book, Live Like a Guide Dog. That's going to be out on August the 20th, although we have pre-orders as well. Michael, we're coming to the end of the show, and I want to say thank you with all my heart and soul. I've never met anyone as, wow, you've opened my mind, opened my heart, you've opened my world.
Well, if people, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, and I really, I'm going to purchase Live Like a Guide Dog. I find
Oh,
it
good.
phenomenal, absolutely. And
It's available in England. It's available in the UK. So go to it.
and we look forward to, because you're going to be in London in
Right.
October.
Right.
What if? So we must keep in contact. I'll definitely be coming along. Well,
Please.
let's see. It'll be
Right.
lovely.
Well,
But I was
and
going to say,
if people do want to explore me coming and speaking to their organizations, and I've traveled the world, it's easy. Email me at speaker, SPEAKER, at Michael Hingson, MICHAELHINGSON.com. Speaker at michaelhingson.com. And we have a podcast, by the way, called Unstoppable Mindset, where inclusion, diversity, and the unexpected meet. And just tomorrow, we'll be publishing episode 250. We started it in August of 2021. So if people want to listen to the podcast or actually see it on YouTube, because we do have it on my YouTube channel, it's available, Unstoppable Mindset. And I hope people will listen. And if they want to be a guest or know somebody who ought to be a guest, love to hear from you. But mostly and especially if anybody needs a speaker, I'd love to chat with you. Speaker at michaelhingson.com.
well, we at USA Global TV and Radio, we want to say thank you, Michael, in every way. You've been a fabulous guest, and your stories and your expressive heart and your connection with the guide dogs, it's just phenomenal. Thank you so much, Michael. And you are contributing to changing the world and helping humanity to understand about the concept of fear. That is a biggie. That's massive. And I just want to say thank you. All of us want to say thank you so much. Please do come back on to the Corner Bookstore, because we want to
Anytime you'd
hear.
like.
We'd
Anytime
love
you'd like.
to. We'd love to hear more about Live Like a Guide Dog and how it went.
Well, one of the things, if people check us out on Facebook or on LinkedIn, a week from Saturday on the 27th of July, we are going to have a pre-launch party for Live Like a Guide Dog. And we're asking people who want to come to register and pay $5 that will be contributed to a nonprofit that we've selected. But anyone and everyone is welcome to the pre-launch party. It will start, our plan is to start it at 11 a.m. Pacific time. And later today or tomorrow, we'll be posting on Facebook and all the major social media sites where people can learn about the pre-launch party. Love to have you come.
Well, I'm sure there'll be so many of our viewers that will home in onto that. And please, we'll put the links in where people can attend. And once again, Michael, thank you so much for being an exceptional guest on the Corner Bookstore. I'm absolutely in awe of you in every way. Thank you so much, and hope to see you very soon again.
Hope
maybe
so.
in London. Maybe in London.
Yeah. Hope so. Looking forward to it, and it's my honor.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, well, now we're going to wrap up time. And before we wrap up time, please do reach out for USA Global TV and Radio. We're currently at 40K. We're looking at 100,000 subscribers by September this year, as well as for Dr. Jacqueline Kerbeck. She's on 11K now. So it's all, please do reach out and become part of the mothership, USA Global TV and Radio. My name is Dr. Madelenechan. Thank you so much. I've immensely enjoyed hosting the Corner Bookstore, and I will see you next time I host the Corner Bookstore. But before we leave, we have a word from our sponsors. And thank you so much, USA Global TV and Radio viewers. Bye.